Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command Show, and welcome to another interview. This time it is with myself and Jack Starr of Jack Starr's Burning Star. Brand new album out, Souls of the Innocent. I highly recommend getting it. This thing is absolutely a masterpiece. A little bit darker, a little bit of a darker edge than the previous one, but nevertheless, some great stuff. And we talk a lot about this record and a lot about some of the past albums that they have done. And speaking of past albums, they have all been reissued. So folks, if you haven't gotten these yet, these are out. These are out right now. You can actually get them in CD format. We do talk about these reissues as well, and a lot of great stuff here. These albums, actually, I was never really able to properly listen to because they were on vinyl at the radio station back in the day, and I had forgotten most of what I had heard on them until I ended up getting these in. So check the interview out. I hope you enjoy it. And this interview today is with Jack Starr of Jack Starr's Burning Star. Jack, welcome to the Metal Command podcast. It's great to have you back on. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on the album, and I'll get your thoughts back on it. I actually think, and a lot of the listeners know this, that the last three records that you have done are probably the best records you've ever put out. And I know, like, people in bands, I know they like to say that, people like to say, oh my God, this is my best album, but I really do think that over these last three records. So what I will tell you is you've been into music for a long time. Every guy or every artist has that one album that you always go to. And for me, it's Stand Your Ground. I think that I don't know if I would like an album better than that you've put out, but it's great. This one's cool. And what I like about it is that it has a darker feel to it, a little bit more. The songs really aren't as upbeat, but the one thing that I noticed that I really liked was a lot of the guitar work, especially the solos, I thought really stood out on this album. So like when I go to the song River of Blood, for example, just the solos were phenomenal in that. And, talk about making this and writing the songs. And was this an intentional thing, or did you, because I look at the album title, it's, Souls of the Innocent. So it has a little bit of a darker feel, and the songs aren't really like mid-tempo or, like the last album was, but it to me, when I listen to it, there's some great stuff on here. And your thoughts on writing the album and how the process went.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that's a great question. And I agree with you that the last three albums are really the best Burning Star albums, with one possible exception being the No Turning Back album that came out in 1987. But that would be the exception. How did we write, or how did we record this? Well, first of all, we were dealing with a worldwide pandemic. So it wasn't really like a happy time for people, to say the least. And I think it kind of got reflected in the music that we were doing. This album was written, recorded, produced, mixed, everything while the pandemic was raging. And I mean, the pandemic is maybe still around, who knows? But so it kind of, had an impact onto what we were about during that time. As far as that particular song that you mentioned, River of Blood, I agree with you. That is really one of my best solos ever, for the simple reason that it's melodic and heavy at the same time. And a lot of my favorite guitar players are like that. And by that, I mean people like Michael Schenker, Gary Moore, Uli John Roth from the Scorpions, Yngwie in the early albums. So I think whenever I'm able to get to that level where I'm playing heavy, good stuff, lots of cool licks, but at the same time, it's melodic. I'm happy.
Right. You know, Michael Schenker too. So that I'm glad you brought that up, because that was what it sort of reminded me of a little bit. He has his solos he has this grasp on melody when he plays a lot of his solos. And you had a lot of that in the guitar work on that specific song. And you had a little bit of shred in there at the same time, but you know, there were a lot of melodic overtones on the actual guitar work in that song. And I remember when I first listened to the album, and typically what I'll do is I don't like to do interviews after listening to it for like a day. I like to absorb it. And I remember when I ended up getting to that song and those solos came on, I immediately almost stopped what I was doing. And then after the song was over, I had to put it on repeat like 3 or 4 more times. And that was really that, you know, every album has that song where you do that, at least with me. And that was the song that did that. And the other song that I really thought that had some really great guitar work in it was All Out War. Yeah, towards the end of the album. That was another one. I'm listening to the record, and that was another one that really grabbed me a little bit. And overall, though, the darker theme of the album, it's so much, to me, it's different than the last one. And I have to say that the one thing I liked about it is that it was different, meaning that, you know, you weren't out there trying to copycat the last couple records or anything that you did. You really just went with this, and it has that dark theme to it. And it really surprised me a little bit. I'll be honest with you. It was a very surprising record, and I like it. I like it quite a bit because of that. But, you know, I Am the Sinner obviously is a good track, but there's one other song that I really just love on here as well. I'm looking at it right now. The Wrath of Attila is a cool track. So overall, darker theme, but at the same time, I like the fact that it went in that direction as opposed to where some bands get caught in repeating themselves.
Well, you know, we wanted to do something that we could play live easier than something that had a lot of multi-tracking. You know, right now, it's easy for bands to pour on the tracks. You know, you want 12 tracks of vocals, it's easy. You want 10 tracks of guitar, it's easy. And some bands get carried away with that. And they put so much stuff, so many tracks, that they make it very difficult to play it live.
Sure.
We wanted something that was direct, and that was something that we could pull off live. And that's what we did with this album. It's a very transparent album. You can hear everything really well, especially, you know, if you have headphones, you know, you'll really can hear everything. I just want to say one thing, because you mentioned All Out War. The first guitar solo in All Out War was actually done by our co-producer, Kevin Burns.
Oh, wow.
And he did a really great job. He is the only guest on this album. And that's the solo that he did. And we all thought it was real good. And but I just wanted to throw that in, you know.
Cool. Yeah. And you know, I want to go back a little bit. You talked about No Turning Back. You talked about that record a little bit as far as, you know, talking about that, because now your back catalog has been reissued. I'm actually able to go on Amazon and order those albums. And before, you know, at the radio station, they had like old vinyl copies of it that I was able to listen to, but now they are being reissued. So let's talk a little bit about that and, you know, the reissues you have coming out, because now you can get all of these records.
Well, you know, I was really happy when I signed the record deal. You know, myself and Ned and everyone in Burning Star, we were really pleased with Globalrock. And one of the reasons we were pleased is that we sensed that they had a commitment to making the music of the, you know, past, dare I say, 40 years, but almost 40 years, making it, you know, more accessible to people. I mean, at one point, and you're going to have to laugh at this. At one point, our Burning Star album, the orange one,
Hmm.
which was out of print for many, many years, it was going up as high as $500
Yep.
for a copy on eBay. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. And I'm so glad that a lot of smart labels like Globalrock with their CEO, Brian Adams, really understand that. And they're metal fans themselves, and they want other metal fans to be able to listen to the stuff, that they want to hear, but they can't afford it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I could never afford, those kind of prices, crazy. So I'm glad it's available now.
And I think that's great because number one, it really shows there's still demand for physical product. I know people talk about Spotify and that kind of stuff, but I'll be honest with you, physical product is actually kind of starting to rise a little bit. When I look at my son, for example, and he's obsessed with collecting vinyl and listening to it. And, ironically, the streaming services are the reason he got in, are part of the reason he ended up getting into the music, but now he's out buying records and, that's all he wants for his birthday, Christmas, whatever. So, what are your thoughts on that? Because obviously you've been putting albums out for a very long time. The industry was a lot different. You had the old Ernie Erdogan business model of the way the record companies used to work. And now it's a lot different since 2000. And, what are your thoughts on streaming? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Is it like one of those rob Peter to pay Paul things? How do you view it?
Well, I think first of all, it's necessary because really not everyone has a record player or even for that matter, a CD player. But they want to hear music and they want to hear it on their cell phones because the cell phone really has become very ubiquitous. It's the center of life for a lot of young people.
It is.
And it sounds kind of crazy to say that.
It is.
But it really, you see like young couples out on dates, and everybody at the table is looking at their device. I saw two couples the other night and all four of them were looking at their devices. And I was thinking, if the other person on the other end of the device is so much cooler than the people that they're with, maybe they need to rethink their social priorities.
Yeah.
But, so what I'm saying is basically, it's become, it's just become so important that I don't want to be one of these older guys, oh man, digital sucks and, so, all that stuff and downloads suck. Whatever gets the music to people, I'm in favor of.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I think it's great though that your son is collecting vinyl and into it and still believes in owning physical things, because what kind of world would we have really if we get rid of all the physical stuff, if we get rid of books and paintings and CDs and records and DVDs, what are we left with? I'll tell you what we're left with. We're left with the cloud. We're left with somebody controlling a big master switch somewhere and deciding what we're going to hear and watch and what we're going to be able to access.
Sure.
I don't want that to happen because I think it's a scary thought.
Yeah, I agree. And, when I go back and look at the history of this band that, your band here, the one thing, you could be a talented guitar player. You've done some solo albums. You did that blues album that I actually think is very good that some people may not know about, but you've always managed to surround yourself with very good musicians. And you could be talented. You could be as talented as you could possibly be, but you got to find the right guys and you have to find the right guys that you get along with and that really are driven to make the music what it is. So over the years, you have Mike Torelli, phenomenal vocalist, and
Todd,
what's that?
Todd Michael Hall.
Yeah, Todd Michael Hall, and just a lot of just great players.
Yeah. See, the thing is, it's really very important. I mean, my mother always told me that you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Right.
If you're in a band with people that don't really have it together, it's very difficult for your band to sound good. We're very fortunate. I mean, we have a bass player that really is up there with anybody, whether it's Steve Harris or whether it's, I don't know, just pretty much anybody. Why? Because he's solid. And the whole thing with bass is you have to be solid.
Right.
You have to provide that bedrock for people to go off. And you have to also be able to go off yourself in the right, spots on the record.
Sure.
We have a great drummer, Rhino, great drummer. One of the best, just like Neil is. I said Neil, I was thinking of Neil Peart because we just talked about great bass players. And as we know, the bass player of Rush, Neil Peart is a drummer, but as we know, they have an incredible bass player, Rush.
Sure.
So getting back to personnel, okay, the singer that we found, or should I say that we were turned on to, Alex Panza, is just a tremendous singer. He can sing. Yep. And, I mean, could this album sound good with another singer? Yes. But, hold on. It says something about, okay, whatever. I know something went on the screen. Could it sound good with another singer? Yes. But they would have to be of the quality of, Todd, Mike Torelli, Rhett Forrester, Dave DeFay, Frank Vestry, Shmulik Abigail. These guys are all incredible singers. So, yeah, but they have to be really, really incredible. Same thing with, could this album sound good with another bass player? Yeah, but they'd have to be like Steve Harris. It would have to be Steve Harris,
right?
And he's not going to take a pay cut to do it.
Sure.
Yeah, Steve Harris could do this album, and would he do it any better than Ned Maloney? I don't know. Probably not. I mean, Ned hit all the right bases. I made a pun. Bases.
I see what
he
you did
hit all
there.
the right bases, and I don't see how it could be much better. Ditto really for Rhino. Rhino played great on the album. Yeah, I mean, maybe maybe the drummer of the Scorpions could have done just as good a job, but he wasn't going to do it. Maybe Bobby Rondinelli or somebody like that could have done as good a job, and by the same token, they could have gotten another guitar player to do all my parts, and I'm sure it would have been just as good, but it would have had to have been somebody really good. They would have had to get Michael Schenker or the guy from, I don't know, Hammerfall or Saxon, or except Wolf Hoffman. Wolf Hoffman would have done a great job on this album.
Sure.
So it's just like, we're at a certain, I guess, I don't know. I don't want to sound conceited because it's not a good look. But I do want to say that, we're all older guys, let's face it, and we've been doing this forever. So there's a certain amount of quality that has to be there. And you get that with a lot of years under your belt.
Sure. Well, to me, it's the best way to describe the band. It is classic American power metal. It's well played. It's well executed. The production is great.
Yeah.
That's just what kind of music you make. And a lot of times you need people that have absorbed that music and really do know what that should sound like and what it should sound like when it comes on record, because obviously this stuff to me sounds a little bit different than the stuff you did back in the 80s. But, again, that's new technology. As a musician, you're always going to refine yourself, your songwriting. In fact, I don't think these albums sound anything like the older stuff at all in my book. I mean, might be some similarities, but for the most part, you just change as a musician. And for you, because you have obviously picked a lot of these guys out, they have to be the right fit. I've always been, the biggest thing is as a musician, you don't find the most talented guys, you find the guys that fit the best. And you seem to have found a lot of great people over the years. And what is something you really look for when you're looking for a singer, you're looking for a bass player, drummer? What about these people makes you say, okay, I want this guy in the band, aside from the talent perspective that we already know exists?
Well, touching on what you just said, it's that experience. It's that listening to a lot of the same music for, 20 or 30 years, so that when you're talking to, let's say, your bass player or your drummer, and you say, hey, I'm looking for an early Scorpion feel over here. I'm looking for like an Eric Carr kind of drum feel here. I'm looking for, whatever. They know what you're talking about. Or, I want something, from a Maiden album, like Power Slave or something, and they know exactly what you're talking about. Would a young guy know all that? Maybe, but it would be harder to, to really be able to lock in and, and just and be on the same page,
Sure.
So in answer to your question, really, that's what I look for. They don't have to be incredible, because I'll tell you something. If you go on YouTube, there are incredible musicians on YouTube. I mean, there's like 15-year-old Asian girls that can play rings around most guitar players. They're amazing. But can they put together a great album? Mm-hmm. Can they write great metal songs? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. I mean, even, you know what I'm talking about when you go on YouTube?
Yeah.
And there's drummers, and sometimes, it'll be like, I don't know, it could be like an 18-year-old girl, playing like these amazing drum intros, and you wonder, well, she wasn't even born when Hot for Teacher by Van Halen came out,
Right.
And Hot for Teacher has like some cool drum fills, or somebody, or like a 12-year-old kid from Indonesia playing note for note Yngwie Malmsteen solos. So it kind of, in a way, it honestly, it's kind of makes me humble, because, when I hear somebody do that, I mean, I've been playing for 50 years now. I still have a hard time, doing all that sweet picking, they call it,
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That thing that Yngwie does, the arpeggios and all that. And yet I see 13-year-old people, men, girls, boys, and they're doing, and they're playing 100 miles a second, and here I am playing forever, and I can't do that. So my strength is really putting together great bands and and being a team player, because really you can't just have the attitude, oh, I'm gonna do everything. It doesn't work like that. I mean, talking about Yngwie, I mean, Yngwie's his first, I think 3 or 4 albums were phenomenal. They were great. And then Yngwie kind of stopped being a team player. And I think it hurt him,
Sure.
So I don't want to stop being a team player, at least not in the metal realm. When I play blues, that's a different story because blues is really, a very, the way I play it, it's a very guitar-centered kind of thing,
Right. And speaking of that, you do play blues. You actually do very well at doing that. When you play a different style of music, does it give you a different perspective, say going into, playing metal and then vice versa when you do that? Because blues is obviously a different style, but, even in some heavy metal music, you still hear some of that in a lot of guitar playing with a lot of guys. And, talk about that a little bit. When you go playing blues stuff, you had that album, Take It to the Bank. That's the one I was trying to remember the title of, but
yes.
And, it was very well executed stuff and it was good. And does that give you a different perspective when you go into, say, writing a heavy metal album and, maybe takes you away from that a little bit and you go into it and, you get that experience doing another type of music?
Well, I have to say one thing. First of all, blues music is like 100% diametrically different than heavy metal music. Blues music swings. Heavy metal should really never swing. It should come off like I don't know, like pillars crumbling in a Roman temple,
Right.
like a 2-ton boat, coming at you. Blues, has that, swing thing that it does, it's, I don't know, Blackmore was kind of a little bit derisive when he said blues was shoe shine music.
It forgot about that.
Yeah, it was almost it was actually almost a little bit racist. But to him, I guess he never really got it, maybe, that blues, what makes it really cool is the intensity. It doesn't matter that it's not metal or hard rock, because you can bring that intensity to blues. There are people like Joe Bonamassa and Walter Trout and Stevie Ray Vaughan, of course, who bring that heavy metal intensity to blues. And I like to think that when I play blues, I'm bringing the metal passion and intensity and fury that's in my playing, and I put it into blues, and vice versa. I think that when I play metal, I bring in a lot of the blues phrasings.
Right.
So there's kind of a cool, I don't know what you want to call it, mélange, the French word, mix, a mix. I was originally born in France, so sometimes I can't think of the English word for things. I know I don't sound like it, but sometimes I'm actually grasping at words in English.
Melange is a great French word to describe it. So
yeah.
And again, you go through that and you come in and write heavy metal music, and there's a lot of I didn't realize this, but there are a lot of heavy metal guitar players that I've spoken to over the years that actually do play blues aside from playing metal. I've even had guys play bluegrass music. Wow. I played in a band with a guy that was a phenomenal guitar player, played metal, but he did bluegrass as well, which I thought was crazy. But he said that the speed of actually playing it helped his picking technique when he played heavy metal. It was crazy, but you think about it, it makes a lot of sense.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was listening to some bluegrass, Speed Pickers, doing country stuff, people like Albert Lee and people like that. And it's really, it's pretty cool to watch these guys do that, But, for me, I mean, I'm kind of like torn between metal and blues. Like, I really love both of them. So it's kind of like, and I've dabbled in other forms of music as well. Like, very few people know this, but I even put out a Latin sounding album. And that was just because I lived in New York, and some of my friends were Puerto Rican, and they turned me on to listening to some of that, Hispanic kind of music, coming from Puerto Rico and Mexico with
Sure.
congas and timbales and I always loved Santana. So for me, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah. I again, and that's something that's cool about you, is that you actually have done different types of music, and you've actually gone and you haven't limited yourself to one thing. And to me, if you're a musician, it's always great to branch out like that, because what it really does is the core stuff that you normally love to do, that you're known for, it really helps keep that keep the diversity there. Otherwise, you end up becoming AC/DC, you end up repeating yourself most of the time. And, the albums you've done, you haven't repeated yourself like a lot of these other artists have done. And I think, and that's why I brought this up, because I think it's important that musicians in general really branch out and try other stuff. That's always been my motto. And when you brought up those Asian kids, talking about, playing all these crazy tracks and stuff, there's one moniker or one slogan I've always gone by, that is the fact that, you can play all that stuff, and really, if somebody put their mind to it, they could learn it. But in the end, what kind of songs do you create and what do you write? And because if playing ability was really the defining thing, then guys in cover bands should be able to just, they can't create anything. They can play covers, but what kind of music do you write? And to me, it's always been harder, but more satisfying to be yourself than to be somebody else. That's where I go with it.
Yeah. And I totally agree with what you're saying, because really it's about, music should be a creative discipline. It should not be something where you're spending your life and your practice time trying to be somebody that you're not. That's not a good thing. And I unfortunately see a lot of that with people trying to be Yngwie. I mean, all over YouTube. It's funny because when you really consider how few albums Yngwie is selling and how few albums he's sold in the last 25 years, his influence on YouTube is ridiculous. I mean, it's like every other guitar player is trying to do that, and I don't know. It's not something that I aspire to, that's for sure. And I just I want to be melodic. I want to do what I'm doing. And really, I'm happy to be on your show, Tony, because my feeling is it's really, at this point in my life, I would like more people to discover what I'm doing. I don't want to just be a well-kept cult secret, where people are actually proud and happy that they're the only one in their town that's ever heard of Burning Star. It's like, okay, I get it. Thank you. But couldn't we have at least like maybe 10 people in your town, whatever little town it is?
Right.
And so anyway, that's a little aside,
Well, you're talking about people. While we're on the subject of people, the one thing I've noticed about the metal scene and the music scene, at least this kind of music, is that it really does embrace a lot of younger people. I remember probably 25 years ago, I would say 25 years ago, I would say a little less than that. I'd say 23 years ago, when Bruce Dickinson first rejoined Iron Maiden, right? Yeah. They had that tour in '99. I remember going to it, and most of the crowd, I could say the average age. Now, back then I was probably 21 years old, maybe. But I remember going to the show, and the average age of people there had to be like 50. Now, if you go to see an Iron Maiden show or even a metal show in general, it doesn't even have to be just them. I see kids that are 16. I see most of it's younger people. And these bands in general, I think a lot of the guys like yourself and everybody else that have been around a long time have really embraced a younger crowd of individuals. And
we have to.
I think that's great, because not everything in life is like that you could be involved in. So when I think of the metal scene, the metal scene is one of the only kind of music where most people couldn't care less what you look like. I mean, you can be old, fat, and bald. If you still make great music, nobody cares, right? All they care about is what you're putting out. It's not about it's not a looks thing. Bands that go out and play clubs, and they don't have to have all the pyrotechnics and the actual screens and all that stuff. If they just go there and play their music, that's appreciated by this crowd. And a lot of the younger people that get involved in it are noticing that. So I think what's happened is, I'm kind of like that middle generation. I came a little bit after you started out playing. I came about 10 years after that. Yeah. And now you have the younger crowd that's couple generations behind me getting into it. But I've always noticed this kind of music. Even when I first started my show when I was 19, a lot of these bands were just embraced me. Even though I knew I was a 19-year-old kid doing a show, I was able to make friends with these guys. And now we're kind of like here getting these young kids into this again.
Well, that's, and that's a beautiful thing, really, because nobody wants to see this music die, right. And we don't want to be the last generation that's playing it. And so I'm pretty confident that heavy metal will survive, and it'll change, like it has. It's changed. It changed when thrash music came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
It changed when grunge music came out in the 90s. It changed when techno. Bands like Rammstein and all that, and I'm sure there'll be some other, stuff, and some of it will be really great, and it'll be like, I'll be thinking, damn, I wish I had come up with that, but so I'm looking forward to it. I want to see the continuous evolution of this art form, because I really do consider it an art form. Not everybody does. A lot of people are kind of disparaging in their outlook and in their assessment of what heavy metal is. But to me, first of all, to be a heavy metal singer, you got to be damn good. It's not easy to sing heavy metal.
No, it's not.
To be a heavy metal guitar player, you got to be good. Same thing with drums. Same thing with bass playing. It's so these people, that, when Zeppelin came out, they were getting bad reviews in mainstream rock magazines like Rolling Stone, and, the writers would say stuff like, oh, that Robert Plant guy, why does he have to scream like that? He sounds like he's squeezing his own lemon, reference to the Lemon song.
Right.
And why are they making all that noise? And what are they so angry about? And this was about Zeppelin that they were saying that.
Sure.
So it's like it goes through these cycles, the evolution, and when I first heard the Sex Pistols, I actually really liked them. I realized that it was not going to be appreciated by most of my friends.
Right.
Because at the time they came out, most of my friends were into, bands like the Scorpions, Zeppelin, Whitesnake, bands like that. And this was, we're talking about, around 78 when the Sex Pistols came out. And, but I was open enough to appreciate what they were doing. And so, and as a matter of fact, when thrash came out, with bands like Metallica and Anthrax and all that, I thought it was really cool, and I liked the energy and the heaviness. Sure. I see you wearing an Onslaught shirt,
yep.
And there's a perfect example of a heavy, balls to the wall band that has some connection, to the thrash movement, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good thing, now if we, flash forward to the year 2022, you have bands like Five Finger Death Punch that are heavy as hell, and amazing. They're an amazing band. What I like about them is that there's a melodic side to them, but then there's a very, very heavy side to them.
Right.
And I think it's pretty cool. And, I've done some thrash music projects like Phantom Lord and Devil Child. And I did it because I really, really loved that music. I loved Motorhead. I thought Lemmy
Who doesn't
was cool
love
as
Motorhead,
hell,
man? Everybody loves Motorhead.
Some
Some just don't know it. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, when I first heard the Ace of Spades, I was like, wow, what a great groove, what a great thing. It was just, it was very captivating. And I'll tell you a funny little thing. When we used to have Burning Star rehearsals with Mike Torelli, when I'm talking about that version of Burning Star, we used to start our rehearsals by doing like stuff by Motorhead or, things like that, just to get our juices pumping, because that's what did it. And it reminded us of what we're here for. We're not here to try to impress other musicians or to have guys that are going to sit around like this. You ever see guys like that at shows?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
They stand by the stage and they're like this. Like, I'm not here to impress those guys, because those guys will never be impressed. I want to get the people that want to have fun and want to rock. And also, I still appreciate the melodic aspect of Burning Star, but we want them to raise their fists in the air, and we want them to get into it, and headbang. It's like get the aggression out, and better to get it out at a metal concert than in a lot of the negative ways that people,
sure,
have.
I can kind of relate to the whole thing of you talking about the Sex Pistols, and you knew a lot of your friends would like them, because when I got into metal music, this was right when the grunge thing started and became big. So I knew most of my friends were not going to be into that kind of music. And it's funny you mentioned that, because there were bands, especially a lot of the more German power metal bands still existed back then. So I was listening to that stuff, along with some of the older stuff from the past and everything. But one thing you brought up about Led Zeppelin being criticized. It's funny in music. It doesn't even matter if it's metal. People that do things that are unprecedented, like nobody had done before, have always been the subject of bad reviews or a lot of criticism at first. I mean, what I think of? I had this discussion with another band that I had on the show. We were talking about that, but I think of how many people were critical of Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh,
They really didn't want to put the camera below his waist because they thought him shaking his legs was offensive. I mean, I know it sounds silly now, but back then was a much more conservative mindset back in those days. So every musician that's always really had to break some kind of ground,
right,
for as big as they are, that ends up happening. And it's funny you mentioned that about Led Zeppelin, because it's crazy how they had horrible reviews, and you'd be shocked at it's insane how many bands that became icons had terrible reviews when they first came out.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the German thrash bands. Probably you were thinking of maybe some bands like Creator, maybe bands like that, And I listened to those bands as well, even though I don't consider them influences. But a wise person once told me, everything that you listen to is really can become or is an influence because you're absorbing. So don't shut yourself off from anything because it's an influence, and everybody has something to offer musically, I love the fact that the bass player in Burning Star, Ned Maloney, is really coming into his own as a writer.
Right.
He was always a great bass player, but the last 2 or 3 albums, he's right in there with me, giving me ideas and writing with me and completing songs with me. And on this album, he's really, what's the word? He's come out, it's like, I don't want to say coming out of the closet because that sounds weird, but he's come out of from behind the curtain, so to speak. And
right.
he's come out as a really strong writer. Oh my God. Listen to the song Ships in the Night. That's my favorite song on the whole album. There's something about that song that grows on you the more you hear it. It's very majestic, and it's something that Burning Star would not have done. Even on the last album, we have cellos and violins in that song. So if you listen with earbuds, you can really hear a lot of stuff going on in that song.
Right. You're talking about Ships in the Night, correct?
Yeah.
I thought, that's funny you bring that up. I thought that was an interesting track because that was definitely not something you would typically hear. And that goes back into the beginning of the interview when I talked about how this album was a lot different.
Yeah.
And that would be a perfect example as to what I was speaking of, aside from just the way the songs were written on the record, just the way they came out. And
yeah.
It's great you bring that up.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's great you bring that up, though.
Yeah. Another thing, too, is we really have to mention Alex because, English is not Alex's first language.
Nope.
And Ned did an incredible job working with Alex on Skype and on Facebook Messenger, Zoom, and all that. And he worked with Alex on Alex's his accent, because we really wanted the lyrics to be understandable. And it's just amazing that he was great, Alex. He didn't get offended, like some people, you can't tell them anything. It's like, oh no, I sound good the way I am,
Right.
But he was like, sure, I'll try it again, and he ended up where most people can't really tell that he's not an English speaker. I mean, some people will be able to tell, but it's not super evident anymore.
Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, I didn't really when I first listened to the album, I didn't look at who the singer was, and I thought he was American.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a good thing. And for people that are very, concerned with lyrics, I'm not opposed to lyric videos. And I think eventually it will be really cool for some lyric videos of some of these songs to come out because the lyrics are really good on this album. Mm-hmm. And I'm not, taking credit for all of them because really I probably wrote maybe half maybe not even half. I don't even, Ned really wrote quite a bit of the lyrics, and the lyrics are really, really good. They have a lot of meaning, like the title track, "Souls of the Innocent." I had to ask Ned, what is this song about? Souls of the Innocent, because it had kind of a metaphysical thing to it. And I was wondering, well, is this like, is this like the occult? What is this? And then Ned just told me, he goes, Jack, I was very moved 3 or 4 years ago by the shooting that occurred in Las Vegas,
Right.
when innocent people were on their way to a concert and they were shot, by a sniper, above them in a hotel room, picking off people. So it makes you wonder, about how fragile life is, and how these people really were innocent souls. I mean, how much more innocent can you get than going with your loved one, or with maybe a new relation, maybe your family, to go see music, which, because music is a noble thing, and so it impacted Ned, and he felt compelled to write these lyrics, for Souls of the Innocent. And I worked with Ned, and, to come up with the kind of riff and the kind of feel that would capture the lyrics. But I do think that the lyrics were actually written before the music, because sometimes that occurs.
Yep.
And sometimes the opposite occurs.
Yep. Because when you write the lyrics, let's say you have them before you have the music, whoever the guitar player, whoever wants to help participate in writing the song, they get the theme of it, and then they think of that theme and think, how do I convey that musically?
Exactly.
And then vice versa, you might have this guitar riff. I know in the past when I've worked with people and I've said they've had this guitar riff, I'm like, this has the first. What I would normally do is write the first thing that would come into my head that it made me think about, right? And I'm, as a musician, you can go and feed off of that, and you need to find the right people to be able to feed off of for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And people that are willing to let you express your vision of their idea, because, Ned could come to me with an idea and it's great, but he is open enough to hear some of my ideas for his idea, and vice versa. And I'm open now, and I welcome Ned's input if I have an idea. So I think it's important, for people to get off their big egotistical butts and realize that great work happens sometimes through teamwork.
Well, absolutely. If you don't work as a team, man, you'll fail, unfortunately. And, you can always listen to albums and you can tell where there's some kind of tension within a band. I've experienced this. There are bands that I have known and I've been friends with that they'll put a record out, and then I listen to the music, and then I realize in some capacity that there was some kind of tension going on. And right. It just, when you have happy people in a band and guys that really want to work together, the albums obviously are going to sound a lot better. When you have people you have multiple musicians, let's say you have 5 guys in a band, 3 main songwriters, and they all don't like each other, it'll almost come off as like a 3-man solo album in a sense.
Right.
And you could always tell that.
Like some kind of monster, the Metallica movie.
Right.
Where you could see in the movie that there was a lot of, tension,
sure.
Amongst the members. And also, I like Metallica. I think they're really a great band. I was almost tempted to say an underrated band, but you can't really say that about a band that sells like 100 million albums.
Right.
You can say it, but it sounds kind of silly, But they are consummate writers, musicians. Songs like "Sad But True" and "Nothing Else Matters" and "Enter Sandman" and and songs also, from the earlier albums are just brilliant, from the Ride the Lightning and all that. And what I think makes them so brilliant is this passion, this incredible energy and passion to get their thought out, to get it out, to get the music out there, and it's great. And and I still have that, and it's just, and I'm so happy that I still have that, because we're talking about 40 plus years of making albums, but I still have that excitement, like I
Right.
really want to connect with people, and so, and you can tell when a band has that and when they don't,
Mm-hmm.
when they're just phoning it in, because they don't really believe in what they're doing, so, and it's the same thing, like, when I hear Rhino play drums, he's got like a killer instinct when he plays. I'll tell you a funny story. We played for a very well-known motorcycle, I don't want to say gang, motorcycle club, because that's what they are. They're a biker club.
Sure.
Anyway, we did a show for them, and they're, these guys they're no nonsense guys. Let's put it that way, and after we finished playing, the vice president of the chapter of this particular biker club, big guy, maybe like 6'4", 300 pounds, and just had that kind of look that nobody would want to test him.
Right.
Just had that look.
I think a lot of those guys do.
Yeah, like a lot of those guys do. So he goes up to Rhino, and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder what he's telling Rhino. They seem to all like us a lot, because they were applauding and clinking their beer bottles, and so I kind of got a little bit closer because I wanted to hear, and I wanted to make sure that there's nothing bad that's going to happen. And I heard him say to Rhino, he goes, "Man, I just want to tell you something. When you play those drums, you sound like you have something against them."
That's pretty funny.
And that was, and I knew that was the highest compliment that man could have given a drummer.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. That's funny though. That's a good way of putting it, in my opinion. Yeah. And, and it's crazy. You talk about the intensity of, you haven't really lost that. It's if you go back as far as even the Virgin Steel stuff. I mean, when I listen to like Guardians of the Flame, probably the second album more so than maybe the first one. The second album, you had a lot of that intensity in your playing, and you never really, in my opinion, have lost that. I went back. Typically, when I talk to a band or an artist, I go back and start listening to a lot of the stuff they've done to kind of put stuff into my head. And I had listened to that album probably in years, but I will say that, there's a lot of that intensity in there, in that record, and you still have that. You translated that into the stuff you've done later on up until today. I can't go back and listen to your last 3 or 4 records and be like, man, he's lost it, because you haven't at all. And that's, I think is a great thing.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you saying that, because to me, that's even more of a compliment than if you had said, oh, you did a really interesting riff in the Aeolian minor scale, or, your legato in the introduction using the harmonic minor was spot on. That doesn't mean anything to me. But if you say something like what you just said, that is something that makes me feel that proud of myself, actually.
Yeah. Well, like I say, my two favorite songs on that record are "Life of Crime" and what was the other one? The title track off the album. I've
Yeah,
always liked those two tracks, probably the
Guardians.
most. And then the first track. I know you didn't write. I don't think you wrote the first song, but the very first song, and "Don't Say Goodbye Tonight," I thought was very good. And I thought you guys actually, when I go and listen to those, I thought you and David made a great, had some chemistry there in those records.
I think we did too, and it's really a shame, really, that we parted ways. I think as you get older, you realize that some of the intense feelings that of I don't know, competitiveness or anger or jealousy or whatever. Those feelings aren't important. What's really important is the ability to work cohesively together,
Right.
and and the ability to respect each other for what you bring to the table, because not everybody is cut from the same cloth. Dave was a schooled musician and very knowledgeable, and so sometimes we butted heads because I was more of a field player,
Mhm.
and my musical knowledge was very sparse back then. And I learned by trial and error. Now, I've grown leaps and bounds, but back then I was really, kind of throwing stuff against the wall and hoping that it sticks. And I was lucky because everything stuck. But, I realize that now with hindsight, and so I'm really lucky that this label, Globalrock, I mean, they see something in me and they see something in Burning Star that they believe is worth for people to hear in 2022.
Mhm.
And my former manager, not Giles Lavery, who's a great manager, not Giles, but my former manager, Frank Cariola. He owned like the biggest club in the Long Island, New York tri-state area. And he managed Burning Star for about a year and a half, I think.
Sure.
And he once told me, he said, your music is not perishable. It's not like, you go to the supermarket, you buy milk or you buy butter and it has a shelf life. This music is not perishable because it's good. So don't worry about being the flavor of the month. Don't worry about, looking over your shoulder. And in my case, looking over the shoulder, there was two other guitar players from Long Island that were basically coming out around the same time as me, Steve Vai and Joe Satriani.
Sure.
And they both did amazingly well, way better than I did. But when my first solo album came out, I did a solo album called A Minor Disturbance. We had the same distributors, which was Important Record Distributors, and I used to get a little frustrated, and I would call up my manager and, why are they just promoting the hell out of Steve Vai's album? Why can't they promote my album? And he would always say, don't worry about it. You made a good album and it'll be around for a very long time. And he was right, because it got reissued a bunch of times and I still get a lot of mail on this album, like I do actually on pretty much all the albums that I've done.
Right.
So it's a good feeling to know that, that it kind of has stood the test of time, so to speak.
It has. And again, you just, when I listen to, there are musicians that one of two things happens. Either A, they regress and they just aren't what they used to be, or they get better. So I think you have gotten better. When I look at a lot of bands, I think a band like Saxon for example, is the older they get, the better they seem to get, and I can
Yes.
throw a lot of bands into that category, but you're definitely in the category of, you know what, I'm going to put out better stuff than I did before, or at least try to. And,
Yeah.
it really has translated well. The last 3 albums, maybe even the last 4, I'd probably could throw Defiance in there a little bit, but I really
would
the
put
last 2.
Iron Maiden in there too. What you just said, as a band that's always pushing to get better, and their albums do get better and better, at least in my opinion.
Well, the one thing that gets better about them is the live show. It's like,
right.
it's like you see them play, and you've seen all the videos, you've seen the Live After Death video. I think everybody's seen that. And then you go see one of their shows, and these guys are in their 60s, and they find a way to make it better than what they were doing before.
Right.
It's just they keep finding that in the live performances. And I'll tell you what, maybe you'll disagree with me. What's funny is the newer albums that they've put out, I wouldn't say they're terrible, but I'm not a fan of them per se, like I was of the older stuff. But what's interesting though is when they put a live record out, there's a whole completely different feel to the songs. So, for example, what was the album? I'm trying to think of the album that really kind of struck me. So, like the Final Frontier, let's throw that one out there, right?
Yeah, great album.
And I like the album. The production for me is so. I would probably usually give those records about a 6 out of 10. I mean, I'd probably make them average. But when they're played live on the live records, I find myself, if I want to listen to the album, I'm pulling the live album out from that tour, because they pretty much release a live album after each studio album anyway. And there's something about that band from the live perspective that shines a lot more. Even when you listen to like Live After Death, then you go listen to Power Slave or something like that. The live versions of these songs, just something about that band specifically, because not every band is like that. The magic just comes out for them.
Yes.
So these records that I think are average sound better than that on the live records.
Well, it's like to each his own, obviously. I mean, I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan, I have every album, every 12-inch, every 45. I love Iron Maiden. I think their last album was brilliant. And what I personally liked about it, I mean, I like all the Iron Maiden albums, but I thought the last album was brilliant because I noticed that there was a little bit more bluesiness in it. Correct. It was heavy, but maybe it was my imagination, but I thought that there was a little bit of a nod to a little bit of that, within it. And I think one song even sounded a tiny bit like it could be Southern rock, So for me, that was kind of a cool thing. But look, to each their own. I mean, for me, Nico is like really one of my favorite drummers.
Right.
Bruce Dickinson is without a doubt, it's Bruce and Eric Adams, my favorite metal singers.
Right.
And wait, there's one other guy. Glenn Hughes.
Okay.
Great metal singer. And I think he's like 70 now. Tremendous singer. But Iron Maiden, to me, it's like every song that they've ever done just has this magic. It's just phenomenal. But anyway.
It's interesting. When you talk about their last album too, what I kept thinking of? Killers had a little bit of that vibe in it too, like with Prodigal Son and some of those. And then you listen to the song Purgatory, and these are tracks that people have sort of forgotten about. Purgatory was actually a single. I actually owned the 12-inch. So I'm like you with Maiden, because there's one thing about Iron Maiden, regardless of if you're a fan, regardless of how many albums you like or dislike, the one universal thing about them that everybody loves is the artwork. And
tremendous.
The last album they put out, the artwork, like when you open up especially if you buy it on vinyl, you open up, the artwork is amazing. And they have never really missed on that, over the years. They never really have. Even on, when you go look at some of the old 12-inch singles and 7-inch singles and a picture disc, because you own them probably like I do. I have the 12, like, for example, I was showing my son the 2 Minutes to Midnight single. I have the picture disc.
Love it.
And, think about the hours that Derek Riggs spent drawing and painting all of these different images for all of these singles. I mean, imagine what went in, because you didn't really have computers back then.
Like Women in Uniform.
Women in Uniform. Yeah. Or like
Aces High.
Yep. Or you have Aces High. Yeah. With the airplane.
I love that.
Then you got the Trooper, then you got the Flight of Icarus. And then you go back to, let's say, another great, probably the best cover they've ever done was Somewhere in Time. And when you look at the Wasted Years single, then you look at, the singles that came out for that album, and like Stranger in a Strange Land.
Yeah.
It's insane, and so, even if I'm not as a big fan, the last album was okay. But the thing is, even if it's not like an album that I think is my favorite of the year or whatever, just the artwork alone makes me want to buy it. It's just how it is.
Yeah,
with them.
Absolutely. And, and I was the same way. If I saw a really cool album cover, to me, it was indicative that the music was going to be good because they were on the right track. The band or the manager of the band or the label, and they were making a statement that if you buy this album, I mean, even if you don't know who the band is, like I didn't know anything about the band Diamond Head. I liked the artwork. I bought it. Angel Witch.
Right.
I liked the artwork. Budgie. I had not heard anything from them. I didn't know about, songs like Bread Fan and all that, but I thought they had killer artwork. So artwork is really important. We try to do that as well in our band.
I think you've
the
done
last
a good
3 or
job.
4 albums have all had, pretty cool covers. And that's part of, wanting to give value to our fans. We're not about trying to do something quickly, and we don't do anything quickly. I mean, I wish we, did things a little bit quicker, but the
artwork for me sets the tone of the album for me, because you always have that image. The image is in your mind. So when I go and listen to an album and I see the artwork, I'm listening to the songs, the artwork is like the image imprinted in my mind when I'm listening to the music. It's like the visual that goes in with it. And, speaking of which, we touched a little bit on older music. What I think is interesting is they found that a lot of the younger generation of people likes a lot of the older stuff that I grew up listening to, the stuff that influenced you, early on. And that seems to have a lot of staying power with people. It's interesting. You brought up the Scorpions, and, we're talking about, we're talking about a lot of these older music that has been out for a long time. Led Zeppelin, for example. And it just, to me, it seems like that staying power, the creativity, the art that these guys made, it continues on even after some of these guys, over the years have passed away.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. For me, a lot of the Zeppelin songs are pretty timeless. Same thing with, Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yep.
That first album with Liar, with Keep Yourself Alive. Great. And before, you had touched upon, how do you find the right people, for a band and so on. And I said it's important to kind of be on the same page. The thing with Ned Maloney is he loves a lot of the same music that I love, and grew up, and cut his teeth, so to speak, on the first Queen album, on the Mata Hoople album, on obviously on all the old Iron Maiden albums as well. And so it's a beautiful thing that we know the same things, and we appreciate Keep Yourself Alive by Queen or Liar or stuff by Mata Hoople. It's just a really nice connectivity that we enjoy.
Right.
And I mean, Rhino's a little bit younger than he's younger. He's definitely like a younger, but he still is into a lot of the same music. But the funny thing is, I've known Rhino for like, I don't know, at least 10 or 12 years at this point. I still don't really know what kind of music he's into. And that's I know it's a weird thing to say. I know what kind of drummers he likes. That I know. I know he likes Cozy Powell. I know he likes the drummer of Whitesnake. What's his name?
Well, there's
from
been, there's been a ton of drummers in Whitesnake.
From that was also in Black Oak, Arkansas. My mind is.
I mean, Cozy Powell did play in Whitesnake for a little bit. If I remember correctly.
That's right. You're right.
Yeah. They had Tommy Aldridge. He was probably one of the more popular ones. It. Yeah.
Tommy Aldridge. Okay. Tommy Aldridge is probably Rhino's favorite. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I can't speak for Rhino, but I know what drummers he likes. I know those guys he likes a lot, and
sure.
But I don't really know what bands he really likes. I'm going to assume that he likes the bands that those drummers were in. Obviously, like Rainbow and Rainbow Rising and Dio, Black Sabbath. I know he likes Black Sabbath because Rhino plays guitar.
Right.
And I tell you, he tunes the guitar down, and does that drop D tuning thing, and he's got it down. I mean, so whatever those bands are that do that, and I think Black Sabbath might be one of them.
Sure.
He can do that, and he can do that really, really well. And so, it's just great that we have this commonality, this shared musical love.
I agree with you on that. And what's interesting is there's always a little overlap, even with metal shows, because heavy metal seems to have this genre of music with like a million such subgenres these days.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's funny, and there's so much diversity in it. It's like it expands. You always have some new form of metal you never heard of that suddenly gets a new term.
I know.
But anyhow,
you know what? It's a good thing. It really is. This is like the longest interview ever. I'm really hoping that people are going to stick with it and listen to it, even though
they might. Well, we're going to end it off here actually, because I want to keep the length down a little bit. But hey, man,
and I wanted to say one thing.
Sure.
One thing too before we sign up, that I would really want people listening to go to YouTube and click on, we did 3 videos for Globalrock, our new label that we're on.
Sure.
Demons Behind Me, Souls of the Innocent, and I Am the Sinner. So those songs are available on YouTube, and there are links when you go to those songs on how to purchase the album and merchandise and things like that.
Cool.
So if this, because there are going to be people listening to this show that have no idea who Burning Star is, who Jack Starr is, who Virgin Steel is. And Joe Perry of Aerosmith once said it best. He said, let the music do the talking. And at the end of the day, I would really like some of those people to just get adventurous, go on YouTube and discover maybe an artist that you've never heard of.
Yeah, that's the most fun of it. Well, hey, I'm going to stop recording here in a second, but I just want to let you know, I'm going to show you something after this, but I just want to tell you, hey, it was great to have you on the show. The last interview we did was very interesting. I actually went and listened to it today when I sent you the link, but I can tell you that it's always a lot of fun to talk to artists. It's why I love doing the show and really getting into the heads of what goes into the music. And to me, that's what really, this is why we do this. We love this kind of music. We love art, and I really appreciate your time. Seriously.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and it's funny that you're wearing the Onslaught shirt, because I think that they just got inducted into the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame, actually.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool thing. And Giles Lavery, who works with them, really was, it was a very good thing for me to know that, he works with bands that have been around the block and that are still out there and that are still kicking ass, like Onslaught is, like Alcatraz is, like Burning Star is. I think that, we got older, but it doesn't mean that we have stopped having something to offer. And that's what I like to think that the new album does.